Is known for his columns and features that have appeared in Canadian newspapers, including for many years, of course, the Calgary Herald. And his latest work is a follow-up of sorts to the success he's enjoyed with his last book, Building a Province, 60 Alberta Lives. This is a pleasure today to welcome an Alberta original in his own right. Brian Brennan is my guest today, and Brian, it's good to have you here. And I say an Alberta original because that's the title of the new work. You follow up 60 Alberta Lives with stories of 60 more Albertas in Alberta Originals, all walks of life, some better known than others, but one common thread. As the title suggests, all of them originals. What do you mean by original in this context?
These are people who, I would say, Dave, they didn't take their cues from anybody else. They carved out a special place for themselves in the world, and you don't get the sense that they were looking over their shoulders for anybody else to show them the way. They just went out and they did it.
To the beat of their own, right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Two of the first three profiles in this book are on people we've all heard of, but not by name, rather by association. I'm talking, of course, about the Big Four and the famous Five.
Right.
Why start off with those?
Well, it seemed to me that we hear a lot. We've heard a lot about both groups, the famous Five, because 2 years ago, October of 1999, was the 70th anniversary of the Persons case, when women it was decided that at that point that women were persons for the first time. They didn't have any sort of real legal status in terms of rights and privileges before that. And so we've heard of the famous Five, but do we know individually who they are?
Right. Well, there's Nellie McClung and
Emily Murphy, and then you have to sort of scratch your head a little bit. And the same too with the Big Four. I mean, a couple of them are sort of stand out, like A.E. Cross and Burns. But do we know, for example, who Archie McLean was? And so this was an opportunity to tell their stories both collectively and individually. That was really what I wanted to do.
Christine Meikle, Max Bell, Frank McMahon, names we use all the time in this city.
Right.
Winspear in Edmonton, another example. Names of buildings or facilities, and your work can help us to know the people behind these names.
That's right, yeah.
Is that part of the reason for putting this together?
Not really. I mean, there's no grand plan, but certainly when you think about it, McMahon Stadium, Frank McMahon and his brother George, Max Bell Arena, you know, Max Bell, who was Max Bell, and yes, for sure, certainly some of them have their names on buildings, and it's nice to be able to tell their stories.
Ernest Manning certainly fits the bill. He's an Alberta original, to be sure, but he's someone that you say in your introduction that you didn't intend on including in the first place because partly enough has been written about him already. Still, there's Bible Bill on page 42.
Yes, yeah. Well, in fact, it was friends of mine who encouraged me to do that. I figured, well, Eberhard, there have been full-length biographies written. Why would I go back and visit the story? And then friends of mine who are writers said, oh, you must. You absolutely must. You've got to tell Eberhard's story. And as it happened, when I was writing about other people, if you're writing about Alberta in the 1930s, for example, somewhere in the midst of that, you're going to be writing about Eberhard. And his name kept cropping up in other stories, and eventually I sort of broke down and I said, okay, I'm going to do Eberhard.
How did you make your selections? That's 120 people you've profiled
so
now
far,
over the last two books. You've probably crossed off enough names for at least another book.
Yes.
How did you make the final decisions?
Well, there's no real science associated with it. It's I sort of go from story to story. I do a lot of talking with people, and they come up with suggestions. This group of writers, as I say, these pals of mine who said you got to write about Eberhard, and it's about as scientific and as casual as that. There's no, as I said, there's no grand plan associated with it. These are interesting life stories. These are people that I've been an Albertan now for 25 years, and these are people whose names I've heard over the years, and when there was the opportunity to tell their stories, I figured, why not?
I'm interested in the research process of this. Yes. You want to be correct in your history, and you managed to find the little-known details. I'm wondering how much of it is up here, how much of it have you filed away from your years as a journalist in this province, and how much work was it to put this together?
Well, I'd say probably there's not much of it up here. Right? It's mostly in the files, and one place where I go regularly, and I'm always pleased to give them, is the Glenbow Museum archives and library, because it's just a wonderful resource. And I would say that probably most of the stories that I've written, it's second-hand information. I mean, it's information that I've taken from other sources. I've taken advantage of the work that's been done by historians and researchers, and then it becomes an exercise in storytelling. I wouldn't begin to call myself a historian, really. I mean, I enjoy telling these stories from history, but other people go out and go through the letters and go through the research and go through the archives and come up with the material that I'm able to borrow then in telling the stories.
Who will enjoy Alberta Originals? People are putting Christmas lists together right now. Is this intended to be used as a resource, or is it something to curl up with on the couch? How do you see this?
Well, I have to tell you, of course, that everybody is going to enjoy Alberta Originals. And I think probably what some people do is they'll think that this is a wonderful book to give to Dad or to Granddad for Christmas. They'll buy the book and they'll read it themselves first, and then they'll give it to Dad. So,
okay. And I would think maybe it has already. I would expect to see it pop up in school libraries, so because it is a resource, really.
Well, some of them certainly. I mean, they're not all historical characters. I mean, I bring them right up into the present day. I mean, some of the people that I've written about are people who died in the last year or so, like Bruno Engler, the mountain man from Banff. Very well-known photographer, and also worked in the movies.
Had a beer named after him too, didn't he?
Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Joe Schachter, who was the founder of the Citadel Theatre. Again, I mean, Les Kimber, who was a film producer, larger-than-life individual here in town, here in Calgary, and certainly I mean, there are the historical characters, but there are also the contemporary stories that I like to tell as well.
All right. Well, you say you don't want to begin to call your story, and you better be careful, or others are going to start calling you.
I'm a storyteller.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your coming in to talk to us about this, and we look forward to having you back to talk about more. I'm sure there's a volume 3 or a third in the series coming.
I'm already working on the next one.
All right, Brian. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
The book is called Alberta Originals: Stories of Albertans Who've Made a Difference. It's published by Fifth House and written, of course, by Brian Brennan, our studio guest today. You can learn more about the author and the book at his website, if you like, at brian-brennan.com. If you go to shawtv.com, you'll find it under today's links as well. And we have a signed copy of the book to give away in our program today. If you call into 716-6040, leave us a date, time, phone number along with your name. We'll make our draw from among your calls. And also an opportunity for you to get out and meet Brian in person. He'll be reading it from Alberta Originals at the James Joyce Pub on 4th Street and 24th Avenue Southwest. That happens Tuesday the 20th at 7 p.m. And again, a book signing at Socrates Corner Bookstore at west end of Kensington Road. That's next Saturday, November 24th at 2 p.m. We're back in just a moment.